See this guy? That's Barry Minkow today. This guy, however, is Barry Minkow 20 years ago, when he wasn't even old enough to graduate high school. As it turns out, he was old enough to build an intricate business empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars, of which the foundation was built on illegalities, cover-ups, and scams. Barry was the teenage mastermind behind Z-Best. Before it went bust, he transcended up the ranks for almost a decade, eventually holding over $100 million worth of stock in his own company. On the outside, Minkow was building a multi-million-dollar corporation composed of two elements: cleaning and insurance restoration. On the inside, he was forging more than 10,000 phony documents, stealing and manipulating, without so much as a strange look coming his way. So who exactly is this rule-bending whiz kid? And of all the possible industries that he could have found himself in, how did he end up in carpet cleaning? It's not exactly up there with firemen and astronauts as the ideal boyhood career. Well, Barry was raised in the San Fernando Valley in California, which is this big area, not too far from the money-slinging big shots in Hollywood. It was here, when he was just a wee lad at 9 years old, that his mother got him a job as a telemarketer for the carpet cleaning business where she worked. Can you imagine getting a call from a 9-year-old trying to sell you something? With this early experience, Barry had a sizable head start into the business world compared to the rest of the kids his age. He continued to work and learn as he transitioned into his teenage years, all the while he was studying full-time at school. Then at 15, Barry got his first taste of ownership. While a sophomore at Cleveland High School, he planted the seed of Z-Best, his very own carpet cleaning business. In the business's early days, there was nothing shady going on. The business was legitimate. He would book clients, drive to their house, do the job, and get paid for it. Squeaky clean, no pun intended. Although, without a driver's license, his friends needed to escort him around town to various jobs. His cleaning services even won praise for their high quality. Without much cash to splash at the time, there was no room for things like office budgets. The company was based in Barry's parents' garage, with barely enough room for the 3 employees and 4 phones that it was housing. However, Barry soon started to approach hurdles. California law did not allow minors to sign binding contracts. And since Barry was under 18, 2 of the business bank accounts that he'd opened were forcibly closed. The expenses began piling up. Barry was struggling to pay his suppliers. Meanwhile, customer complaints started to rise. At this point, money was desperately lacking, and Barry had no qualms going to questionable lengths to gain some. Check kiting, staging break-ins, and even stealing and selling his own grandmother's jewelry became part of the norm. Then came the expansion. Until this point, it was just cleaning, but now it was insurance restoration as well, the side hustle which eventually accounted for 86% of all the company income. This was the critical moment, the point that saw Barry's business cross the line. Before we tell you how, we need to introduce this man, Tom Paget. Tom was an insurance claims adjuster with the know-how and the contacts in the insurance sector. Together, Tom and Barry forged a number of documents that claimed that Barry's company, Z-Best, was involved in several restoration projects for Paget's company. They foolproofed this fraud with yet another layer of fraud by forming a fake company called Interstate Appraisal Services. This fake company, which remember Barry and Tom had created, was the one verifying details of the fake restorations to Barry's bankers. In the eyes of the bank, Interstate Appraisal Services was legitimate, and therefore so was Barry, and therefore so was Z-Best. The banks had fallen for the illusion that Barry ran a profitable business, therefore were confident enough to dish out loans. After graduating in 1985, Barry's sole focus shifted. The school books were thrown out the window, and all eyes were now on his so-called company, Z-Best. The company continued to grow, supported by its fraudulent foundations. Then, in January of 1986, when Barry was just 19 years of age, Z-Best went public on the stock market. But how was this even possible given all of the underlying shadiness? Before a stock goes public on NASDAQ, like Barry's company did, they are audited. Consider Barry a little fortunate here because the accountant who had audited Barry's company prior to its IPO didn't physically visit the insurance restoration sites that they claimed to have operated in. Had the accountant physically done so, he would have realized that the addresses provided were simply mailboxes scattered throughout the San Fernando Valley. In the eyes of the public, Barry knew what he was doing. His face appeared on TV commercials. He was driving around in a Ferrari, and he owned a mansion in the wealthy Woodland Hills, a significant upgrade from his parents' garage. With the flawless facade intact, shareholders had no qualms throwing their money into the pile to become part of the General Motors of the carpet cleaning industry. Yeah, that really was one of Barry's advertising strategies. The company eventually reached a market cap of more than $200 million. Barry's plan was simple. He'd wait the 2 years required by law and then sell his shares. but it didn't quite pan out as planned. Money was still needed, so he persuaded to raise another $15 million in capital. Again, auditors were swooping. So how did he deflect them this time? The auditors wanted to tour the Interstate Appraisal Services office building, so Barry gave them an office building, although it wasn't his, he just borrowed it. And when the accountants asked to witness a current insurance restoration project, Barry simply took them to a half-built structure, claiming that it was a legitimate restoration job that they were working on. Of course, the auditors lapped it up because all of the lies were backed up by thousands of fake documents that were created by this man, Mark Morsey. He was the financial consultant for Barry and Z Best, and he had no hesitations breaking the rules. The fraud grew, the money grew, and Barry had almost reached a point where he was in the clear. He had orchestrated a move that would have allowed him to wiggle free of the twisted web of lies that he'd entangled himself in. What was that move? A merger. The plan was to join forces with KeyServe, which at the time was on the market for sale. KeyServe was the authorized carpet cleaner for Sears department stores. The two companies were in the same industry, so the acquisition was believable. If Barry could inherit KeyServe's business, it would solve all of the cash flow issues that he was facing and allow him to start righting his wrongs. KeyServe and Z Best agreed to a $25 million deal. The pair would merge and Z Best would be the lone survivor. Barry intended to then raise between $700 and $800 million to buy ServiceMaster, another commercial carpet cleaning company, and expand internationally thereafter. He even commenced talks to buy the MLB's Seattle Mariners. All of this was weighed on the KeyServe deal going through without a hiccup. If this deal were to succeed, then it was full steam ahead. But of course, it did not. Then came the backbreaker. Just before the two companies signed on the dotted line, the downfall began. With a foundation built on fake customers, fake projects, and fake supporting documents, it was only a matter of time before it all crumbled in on itself. The straw that broke the camel's back came from events happening behind the scenes. While Barry was busy working toward a merger, one woman had come forward saying that she had been overcharged a few $100s for a carpet cleaning and was yet to be paid back. Barry just ignored the threat. Small fish, big pond, he thought. However, the woman, determined to get her money back, managed to track down several other people who'd also been defrauded by Barry. To make waves, she submitted all of her findings to the LA Times. That put the spotlight on Z Best, and now it was trouble time. The story was published days before the merger was supposed to happen, sending the stock price plummeting 28% in the blink of an eye. This proved the catalyst in the chain reaction that caused more agencies, including the SEC and the FBI, to dig, and for more fraud to be uncovered. When the controversy was at its highest point, Barry Minkow abruptly resigned for health reasons. Less than several months after the initial public offering, the company was bankrupt, and its assets were auctioned off for a measly $64,000. Once all the cards had fallen, the punishment was laid down. In January of 1988, when Barry was yet to turn 22, he and 10 other staff were convicted of 54 counts of racketeering, securities fraud, money laundering, embezzlement, mail fraud, tax evasion, and bank fraud, as a result of close to 90% of the company's revenue being fraudulent. That's a hefty rap sheet. After trying to lie his way out of some of the charges, on December 14th of that year, he was found guilty of everything. The sentence? 25 years in prison. But he only ended up serving 7.5 of those 25, most of them at the Federal Corrections Institution in Inglewood, Colorado. Following his early release in 1995, Barry claimed to be a born-again Christian. However, old habits die hard, and in little time he was back to his mischievous law-breaking schemes. While working as a church pastor, he founded the Fraud Discovery Institute. Ironic, isn't it? Until you learn that the Fraud Discovery Institute was indeed also a fraud. He would use the investigative journalism power of the organization to his own advantage. Before he would publish a damning report on a public company, he would sell his own shares in said company. He would then rebuy them when they were near worthless, only for the stock price to rise again once the reports were proven to lack substantial facts. In essence, he was shorting the stocks that he himself was manipulating. Eventually, Barry pleaded guilty to insider trading as well as church fraud, admitted to embezzling over $3 million in donations to the San Diego Community Bible Church, where he was head pastor. As the icing on the cake, he also hid nearly $1 million worth of income and $250,000 in taxes from the IRS. After being sentenced on April 28, 2014, he finally remained locked up for over 5 years, finally released on June 6, 2019. So guys,